I think as a black community, we're getting a little bit better at talking about mental health, but we're not quite there yet. When we talk about mental health, we start to make it synonymous with mental illness, and mental health and mental illness, two different things. Mental health is a continuum, and if we're honest with ourselves, all of us, if we have breath in our body, fall somewhere on that continuum between mental health and mental illness. The question is, can you identify yourself on that spectrum? Because when you do and humanize yourself, you then get to humanize your teammates, your family, your coaches, and others. Life circumstances and what we go through can cause us to shift on that spectrum at any given time. And I got 5 brothers up here who have gone through some stuff, who have shifted through that continuum, and we want to create the vulnerable conversation to talk about it, because as black men, we have a lot of work to do. So to start off with, why don't we take 1 minute for you to introduce yourself, each of you, to the audience. We'll start right here with KD.
Good morning. My name is KD Hill. I'm a former Ole Miss football player. Howdy toddy. I had a football career in the car accident. Notice how I said football career ending, because it wasn't my career that ended. Football was the thing that equipped me for my career, right? It's something that I did. It wasn't who I was. And so on July 21st, 2023, 3 days before NFL training camp, I found myself trapped between a tree and a truck for 5 hours. Not once did I shed a tear. It took 3 hours for them to call my mom. They thought I wasn't going to make it. I had 2 blood transfusions on the scene. The first person to arrive on the scene was the state trooper, and I said, "Can you hold my hand and let's pray?" Once I was airlifted to UAB Hospital after they amputated my leg on the scene, I woke up to my mom with a Bible in her hand. I said, "Hey, Mom," I said, "can you feed my spirit?" Because I understood in this next level of my life, I couldn't go through with a malnourished spirit. That next day, I got up on the walker and I walked. That is why I'm up here on this stage today.
Amir, up here.
Morning, y'all. Pierre Banks. I'm from Durham, North Carolina originally. Came up in the neighborhood. Got 16 brothers and sisters, so I'm 16 to 17. And up until the 5th
Busy
grade.
in that house.
Yeah. Up until the 5th grade, everything was great, man. House full of people, house full of love. Everything was perfect. And then my mom passed from breast cancer. And then all my older brothers and sisters stopped coming by the house as much, because they were hurting. They were dealing with a lot. My pops drove long distance trucks, so he was going at least 6 days out of the week. And so a lot of times I found myself by myself. I stayed with a couple brothers a couple times, but then found myself at home, and had to grow up quick. If I didn't make the bus, I didn't go to school. There was nobody there to take me, you know what I mean? It was nobody checking for me. Like, how you doing? Did you graduate? Like, did you pass your classes this semester? Any of that kind of stuff, man. And so, being from the neighborhood, you got to move a certain way. You got to dress a certain way, or you become a target, right? And being by myself a lot, nobody was, like, even asking me, how you doing today? Or that type of deal. So now, I hear people a lot at work say, "Man, you real secretive. You don't really talk about a lot of stuff." Because I'm used to not talking to people. I'm used to not checking in with people. I'm used to having to make my own decisions. But having that many brothers and sisters, it allowed me to view how they live life, view their mistakes and try not to replicate them, view their successes and try to repeat them. And once I graduated high school, went to App State, and I went from being in the neighborhood to seeing nothing but white people my first day on campus, man. I called my brother. I said, "Man, I ain't never seen as many white people before." And he started laughing like they said, "Man, that's the way the world look. Like, you just don't know yet," right? But it allowed me to be able to communicate with different cultures, to understand different people, man, to fit in different places. And it allowed me to be able to make people feel comfortable as I talk to them or whatnot. But when you do that, you spend most of your day, trying to make other people feel comfortable. You get home and you yourself for 1-2 hours. So at a certain point, you're like, who am I? Am I this person that I am every day? Or am who I am, who I know I am, who I grew up to be?
That's
who
good.
I am when I get home.
That's good. Appreciate that. You already hopping in the conversation. I like it. Amir?
Hello, everybody. It's great to meet you. My name is Amir Carlisle. I'm from the Bay Area, so I don't know if we have anyone from the Bay here. but grew up in Santa Clara. Played at USC my freshman year, ended my career at Notre Dame. We'll dive into it, but ultimately had a botched surgery my sophomore year that really at the time was probably the most painful thing that I had gone through. But now looking back at it, it's really where I draw my purpose from. So excited to have the conversation with you all today. Appreciate you for having me.
Hey everybody, I'm Marty McNair from the Jordan McNair Foundation. A lot of you all probably are way too young probably to remember our story, but in 2018, I got the phone call that the brother just talked to. June 29th, it's like, here we go again. We relive it every year, 7 years later. June 29th, we got a phone call that said, hey, Mr. McNair, there's been an incident on the field. Jordan had a seizure. And unfortunately, we went from that call to an emergency liver transplant less than 3 days later with 85% of Jordan's liver being in necrosis. So if you're in the medical space, 85% of his liver was dead. And unfortunately, my son passed 2 weeks later. He had a heat stroke. Very first day of condition drills at University of Maryland. And as a parent, I didn't know anything about any type of heat-related anything. I thought if you got overheated, you just got the shade, drank some water, all would be right with the world. And here we are 7 years later as a foundation, and we go around the country with conversations like this, just educating parents, coaches, and most importantly, you to listen to your bodies, protect yourself, and really how to really stay safe amongst it all, on and off the field.
Awesome. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm just blessed to be here on this panel in this summit and to be in front of you. My name is Boaz Bivens, better known as Coach Bo. Originally from Detroit, Michigan, the east side of the D. Played collegiately at Grambling State University, which is where I began my coaching career. Had a chance to play pro-ams and some other things like that, but I have coached on every level, right? I've been very fortunate to coach in the NBA, been very fortunate to coach Division I, Division II, NAIA, JUCO, AAU, right? And won an AAU national championship, right? So I'm very fortunate to be able to talk to you all in this capacity of how we deal with our student athletes and their mental capacity. So I'm just grateful and thankful to be here.
I appreciate that. Let's hop into it. Amir, I want to start with you. Like many of the student athletes out here, you suffered from various injuries. We could talk about collarbone injury. We could talk about 5 surgeries, but it was the ankle injury, a temporary, quote unquote, minor injury that through getting treatment ended up with a punctured nerve, chronic permanent pain that you now walk around with that ended your career. Can you talk about what did that do to you mentally and emotionally?
Yeah, it was a tough experience to kind of give context. So like I said, grew up in the Bay, went to USC, was highly recruited. Was, I think, number 2 all-purpose running back in the country. Had, aspirations of starting, coming into first week of camp. Came out of camp as the starting running back. Had a, up and down, had a high ankle sprain going into that first week, but played as a true freshman. At the end of the season, I had a conversation with Lane Kiffin, and he said, look, I want you to be the guy. We're gonna really highlight you this next year. So in my head, I'm like, okay, fast track to the NFL. Family ended up moving, so ended up making a transfer to Notre Dame. Had one friend on the team. I just wanted to get some extra work in and catch balls. He had a bad day. I borrowed his gloves because at USC we couldn't actually, use people, or we didn't actually we got one glove. So I just borrowed his because I was afraid to ask the training staff. And kind of we got into this shoving match. He got mad and this and that and stepped wrong, ankle snap. We're out on the field. I'm like, oh, I went to the training room and he was like, oh, you broke your ankle. At the time it was January, so I'm thinking that, okay, I'm going to go back and rehab. I'll be back for the season. During that surgery, they did a nerve block, which was supposed to give 24 hours of pain relief. And, coming out of it, didn't have feeling the next day, the next week, 2 months later, still couldn't feel from the back of my calf through my foot. Basically that rehab process, which should have taken, 9 months, ended up taking 20 months. And I couldn't walk. I still, to this day, 12 years later, don't have any feeling in my foot. And it really just shifted everything where, I was really, I was going to go to the NFL. I probably would have been a top 3-round pick. But it was just the most pain that I've ever been in. I had to be on narcotic painkillers for 6 months just to fall asleep. Would wake up in the middle of the night throwing up because I had to take Vicodin every night. And it just was the worst experience for me. And just felt alone. Went from all the coaches, this we're going to do with you this year, to nobody talking to me. My identity really had been wrapped up into me as a football player. And for that to be taken away, I felt like I lost my purpose. I lost myself. And for me, what really changed and shifted my perspective was a conversation with my mom. I'm sitting there. I literally was in the most pain of my life. I'm biting through a Gatorade bottle because the nerve pain was that bad. Felt like I was being electrocuted every 10 seconds. And, she said 2 words that changed my life. She said, be grateful. And at the time, I had no clue what to be grateful for. I'm like, man, I lost my career. I hate it here. It's cold. I don't want to be here. What do I have to be grateful for? And up until that point, I focused on everything that I lost. I lost a potential football career. I had lost, feeling in my foot. I had lost dreams. I had lost aspirations. But those 2 words shifted my perspective as to what I did have. I had a loving and supportive family. I had the opportunity to, earn a degree from a school like Notre Dame. And really that perspective shift, it didn't erase the pain. The pain was there. The emotions were there. The feeling of defeat was there, but it gave the pain purpose. And for me, I found my purpose in that moment, which was, we all go through highs and lows in our lives. We all experience it. We've all been through adversity. But for me, it was, how could I use this adversity to make other people's lives better? And so, it was like, how can I take this pain and use it to serve, use it to heal, use it to build? And ultimately, it's kind of giving me the model that I live by today, which is, I went through it so somebody else doesn't have to go through it alone. And so that really was kind of, my story from, being in the dumps to now where I'm at now, doing what I do now.
Man, that's powerful. You talk about this loss of identity in that as well when you go through. And Pierre, I think you could relate to that as well, right? You grew up in a house with 16 brothers and sisters. It's probably easy to get lost in the mix, right? I only had 2 brothers, and my mom couldn't remember my name half the time, calling me everybody else. So you go from locker room in your own house to locker room, locker room, locker room. And when you transition out of sport, you're left with, who am I? Talk to me about that process.
Yeah, it was tough because in my mind, I knew who I was, but to everybody else, I was who I thought they wanted me to be. Because again, I was trying to make them feel comfortable. And being by yourself, you always want everybody around you to be comfortable because you don't want to be a target. Wow. It's like, if you tell people too much information, they'll use it against you in whatever way. And so I was trying to, fit in wherever I was. And I got to the point where I was on the radio in North Carolina. And my program director and the general manager brought me in, sat me down, and they was like, Pierre, your style is too urban. And I was like, man, I don't even know what that means. So I can't really come back at you. I don't know whether to be mad or like what's going on. So I had to look that up later and come back. But they was like, you're a little too urban. We want you to be like you are with us when we see you around the station, right? We want you to be you. I said, I am being me. What you mean? Nah, I want you to be like, how you see us, you talking to us and you real, all that kind of stuff. I said, man, I am being me. So I've been with myself 30-something years, and I got somebody in front of me who I spend maybe a total of 1.5 minutes with every day in front of me telling me who I am, right? And so that's one thing. Don't ever let anybody tell you who you are. You know you better than anybody.
That's real.
So I got this guy telling me all this stuff, and what it made me realize is I'm assimilating too much, right? So I got a choice to make. I can continue to do this, or I could just be me, right? I'm not going to disrespect anybody, right? I'm trying to love everybody. I'm trying to be a man of God, right? But from now on, I'm not going to talk differently when I get around white people. I'm not going to, be a different person in different spaces no matter where I go because now I lost myself. Because it had me questioning, man, who am I then? For real, right? But, those sorts of things, it helps shapes who you are. And I'm not saying I regret anything I did coming up because it helped me to get to a lot of different places. But with experience and at this big age I'm at now, I'm just to the point of where I don't want to be in spaces where I can't be myself. Right? And I've built a platform to where I can do that. Now, I'm not saying for y'all not to do it. If you feel like you need to do it, then do it. Like that's what I did when I was a little bit younger. But now I don't have to do it. And so I make it a point to be myself when I'm around anybody. And what I found is that allows people to be comfortable and that allows people to be themselves and feel like they don't have to be a certain person or talk a certain way when they talk to me.
That's a good point. Sounds like you have a foundation that you found that you can grip onto. And when you're going through mental health issues and you feel lost and you feel confused, oftentimes it's like being dropped in the ocean, you reaching out for anything you could grab. And sometimes that's the comments and remarks of other people. But when you have a solid foundation to grab onto, you kind of anchor yourself. KD, you're in 3 days going to go out to the Buffalo Bills training camp on your way to the NFL and end up between your truck and a tree with your brother next to you with a broken jaw laying there, and they think you are dead on the scene. They don't even come looking for you. Have to take your leg in order to get you out the car. So talking about a period of feeling lost, what was that like for you in that moment and the days following?
Well, that's a great question, Dr. Sutton. You can look at it as a blessing or a curse. Having a great attitude equals gratitude. So in that moment, I wasn't thinking about football. I was just grateful for having breath in my lungs. They thought I was dead, but God had other plans for me, right? What the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. If the devil knew who I would become after that, he would have never even sent the storm. And so right then and there, you have to check yourself. Your perspective can be your assassin or it can be your passport. Right? I'm 25 years old, just turned 25 last week. I listen to Rod Wave. He talk about passport junkie. Your passport can fly you across the country. Well, in reality, your perspective can do the same thing as well. And so with that being said, I have to have faith, right? Faith is going to look like this, and faith is going to look like this some days. With that being said, you have to be persistent in your faith, right? Faith is the shovel that's going to move your mountain. You're not going to dig the same amount every single day with that faith. But as long as you continue to be consistent, that mountain will move. Now, with these mountains in your life, I love to talk about mountains because I have a book called The Uphill Climb, the KD Hill story. And with these mountains, you have to understand you can't always go over the mountain. You're going to have to go through the mountain, right? When you go through this mountain, that leaves residue and evidence that you've gone through the mountain. That evidence is my right leg. Some things must take place in that way, so when others look at your life, but most importantly, when you look back at your life, you say it was nobody but God's grace that was guiding me through it. And so that is why I'm standing here today, because of his grace and mercy, but also because of my perspective. Understanding that we all have to go through a university, right? Many of us are in a university, but there's going to be another type of university you're going to have to face. And that's adversity, which is God's university. And through that university, it's going to teach you things that you never knew about yourself, right? It's not there to break you. It's meant to show you things that you never knew you had inside of you. And I'm going to leave you all with this. How many of y'all like to plant? Raise your hand. Or know someone that plants. All right. We all have planted seeds in our life. So before you complain about the amount of rain you receive in your life, remind yourself the type of seed that you planted. Because as you see, when you plant, different plants require different amount of water. All the seeds that we plant in our lives are different. So the type of seed I plant will receive a different amount of water that yours will receive. So before you complain about that rain, remind yourself the type of seed you plant.
Man. You was gonna mic drop like that, huh? Man, that's some crazy perspective you have. I mean, that's great perspective you have there. A lot of people don't have that perspective. Coach Bo, you coach men's basketball at Morehouse. You've coached, like we said, a lot of different places and have dealt with a lot of brothers. I don't know how many of you have that perspective right there. But how do you work with these young men who are going through adversity to get their perspective right? And how do you use your story to help with that transition?
That's a great question, Doc. For me, it's real simple. You know, I listen more than I talk. You know, I think in order to reach somebody, you got to understand where they're coming from. You got to understand what they're going through. You have to position yourself to be in their shoes. So we have a lot of one-on-ones. I meet with my players one-on-one. Each player has a different day and time that we meet. And when we meet, we don't even talk about basketball. We talk about life. We talk about the things that they endure every day. We talk about their relationships, right? We just talk about them. How are you doing? And then there are times where we just pray. See, I think a lot of times, we miss that aspect. When they took prayer out to schools, we just really stopped praying. And so for me, I believe in that faith. That's what got me through. When they talk about mental health, I know Doc had a thing where he say 25%, of African-American students don't go seek help because we never seen that.
Right.
It was more prayer, right? 40%, he said of the Caucasians, they go get the help because that's what they saw, right? And so my grandmother prayed, right? My mama prayed, right? Yeah. So when I meet with the players, we pray, right? And there's sometimes where some teams, rather, where we will get together and we'll say the Lord's Prayer. When I was a head coach, I just tell the guys, we're going to pray, bow your head, you say your prayer, whatever that may be, right? But we're going to get through it, And so I look at them, they look at me, and they see the transparency, so that allows them to open up. So now I know exactly what they're going through. Then you got to know your players. Right. A lot of coaches don't even know their players. You know what I mean? They just know their name and their talent. Yeah. You know what I mean? So they don't know that, where they coming from. They don't know what they're going through, right? I was the breadwinner for my family in college. Mama waiting on that refund. When you get that refund, you know what I mean? God forbid, I'm playing today. Shoot, that is man, right? But because of prayer, and the transparency and being a listener, it helps me to be that much more of an effective coach in dealing with my student athletes.
Man, that's powerful. And I wish every brother had somebody like you as a coach, but unfortunately they don't. Sounds like you empower them, you equip them, you have them advocate for themselves, but that's not happening everywhere. Marty, that's what you stand on now through your experience. Jordan, phenomenal young man who is doing everything he can to push forward and do what he was supposed to do. And it still didn't work out the way we thought it would work out. What do you have to tell student athletes about standing up and speaking out and advocating for themselves?
Yeah, so, man, I'm going to tell you, I told Jordan two things when he was growing up. I told him to be coachable, right, which I was just basically running off my info. Whatever coach said was the right thing to do. Coach say run through that brick wall, you run through that brick wall. Coach say jump off that cliff, you jump off that cliff. And it sounds crazy, right? It sounds really crazy because I tell kids nowadays in spaces like this, if coach ain't jumped off that cliff, if coach ain't ran through that brick wall, right, or coach ain't done nothing that sounds absurd that he's asking any of you to do, then you decide whether you want to do it or not. Because, see, I think what happens is you all think that if it don't work out, right, you're going to go live with coach. No, you're going to come back to your family, and we're going to support you based off of your beliefs. Because one of the main things that I had to learn the hard way, just because Jordan died, University of Maryland didn't stop their football season. That's right. Come on. Just because all the countless young people in you all's positions, unfortunately, have died due to tragedy, guess what? The game did not stop. And it's not going to stop. They're going to honor you. Probably, look, they went out in formation, minus one person, held Jordan's jersey up, but guess what? The game still went on. So the most important thing is everything everybody just said up here, y'all got to create partnership. Because now, even on the funny side, what Coach was just saying, there's so many resources nowadays. Nobody should be walking around with no side teeth missing out their mouth or no bad teeth in their mouth. Some of you might not even catch that because if you got good health insurance, there's no way, right? There's no reason that you should not be taking care of these things that are just, well, we didn't have resources, so we didn't have no choice. Nowadays, you all have resources. Utilize your resources. Your mental health is your most important resource.
That's right.
Dr. Moo just said it. Every campus has mental health resources, but the most important thing with my new book called The Fifth Quarter, since we plugged in books, right? My new book, I teach parents this because, see, everything starts at home, right? Because as parents, two things happen as you all get older. Our voice gets smaller and your voice gets bigger. Because if you can't advocate for yourself, Who gonna do it? And and this is what I do. I talk to mental health professional. Coach ain't no mind reader. So he ain't gonna know what's going on with you if he's in tune with you because y'all got a partnership. He can sit there and say, well, you don't look right today. But if you ain't saying nothing, there's no excuse not to say anything. Rest assured, the game is not gonna stop if something happens to you. If you take nothing, remember that. The game ain't gonna stop. So you're your best advocate with everything that you're doing. Y'all gotta sit there and literally put the emphasis on your own mental health. Moose said it. Guess what? I ain't feeling it today, coach. I ain't got it. Coach know your work ethic. Coach, if you know that work ethic, I already know you're a beast. If you ain't got it today, I respect you more because you spoke up for yourself.
That's real. That's real. That's real. Appreciate that. Before we close out, 10 seconds, one line. What will you leave them with? And plug your book, Coach Bo.
Oh, no question. So everything that everybody said. But, real talk, when you decide that you want to go pursue something in regards to your mental health, it's a choice, right? The book is entitled Choices and Consequences. It's a bestseller. And the color is blue for a reason. It's the blueprint, right? Each chapter deals with a different choice, one you have encountered and one that you will encounter. But if you know that you're dealing with something, it's a choice to go open up to someone and share that, and then the consequences that you're going to get better.
That's good. Appreciate that. Marty, 10 seconds.
Keep your faith. Keep your faith, and don't be afraid to speak up for yourself. And most importantly, take care of your mental health. Make that your priority.
Amen. Amar?
Stay prayed up. It's okay not to be okay. Speak up and say something.
Pierre?
Love everybody first and foremost, but be yourself, man. Be yourself, because it's a lot of people that are no longer with us no more because they've been out pretending to be somebody else for so long, and it's messed up their mental so bad they can't take it no more. So be you.
KD?
Real faith is not having zero doubts. Real faith is trusting God with those doubts.
Put our hands together for the panel.